This is former Governor George Wallace in the center and Vivian Malone Jones at a recent event at the state capitol in Montgomery, Alabama. The Wallace Foundation presented Ms. Jones with an award. In 1963, then Governor Wallace tried to prevent Ms. Jones from registering at the University of Alabama by blocking an entrance to a university building. Here now is that awards dinner, which begins with a video presentation on the life of Lurleen Burns Wallace, the governor's wife.
Ladies and gentlemen, I will be a candidate for governor of Alabama. And I can tell you this in utmost sincerity. I am humble and proud to have been elected to represent such a people. I am proud to be an Alabamian.
I'll wait till this stops. Good evening to all of you. We appreciate you being here. I'm sure many of you recognize the music in that video tribute as Stars Fell on Alabama. And we think a star did indeed fall on Alabama 70 years ago when God blessed the state with the gift of Lurleen Burns Wallace. She was an individual of rare qualities, and we'll hear more about those qualities tonight as the Wallace Foundation Center for the Study of Southern Politics presents the first annual Lurleen B. Wallace Award of Courage. And on behalf of the Wallace Foundation and the Center for the Study of Southern Politics, I would like to welcome all of you to this celebration, the type of which Alabama has never seen, but will long point to and fondly remember. Tonight's award ceremony is being taped in its entirety by C-SPAN for later broadcast. We're also delighted to have all of these folks along the back of the room with us, one of whom a long time ago I used to be. We're glad to have you here for this event. And we have lots of folks to recognize tonight, quite a few special guests, and because there are so many of you, you can stand if you'd like, but we may be standing all night, so I'm going to go ahead and run through the list. First, I'd like to recognize the generous groups who sponsor tables for this event. And that group includes Bell South, McMillan Blodell, the Alabama Trial Lawyers Association, the Montgomery Advertiser, the Economic Development Partnership of Alabama, and thanks to all of you. Please give them a hand. We're also honored to have a great many family members of tonight's award recipient with us, and I am going to ask these people to stand. I'd like to ask the friends and family of Ms. Vivian Malone Jones to please stand and be recognized, and would you please applaud for them? Please stand. There's no doubt about who the tallest member of that group is it? We're also honored to have a lot of public servants with us today, and I'm going to run through this list, and it's quite a list. Former Alabama governor and currently a judge on the state's Court of Criminal Appeals, Honorable John M. Patterson, is with us. Our congressman from Alabama's 7th District, U.S. Representative Earl Hilliard, is also here. From Alabama's 60th Legislative District, I think he's here, Representative Julian Hilliard. Is he here with us? Not? Okay, I missed that one, sorry. Moving back to the judiciary, I'd like to personally welcome a mother whose cute baby I almost kidnapped a few weeks ago during our women's conference, the Honorable Sue Bell Cobb from Alabama's Court of Criminal Appeals. She didn't bring the baby tonight. I think I scared her the last time. From Alabama's Court of Civil Appeals, the Honorable Sharon Yates is here as well. Judge Lynn Bright from Montgomery County District Court. And I'm sorry I haven't worked the entire crowd. I don't know if they're here tonight or not. I hope they are. From Montgomery Circuit Court, we go back to the masculine side of the bench. Honorable Gene Reese and the Honorable Charles Price, are they with us? I did not see them over here. Okay. And last, and last of this group I just mentioned, certainly not least, a person we're pretty proud of, not only because he's a Supreme Court justice, but he's on our board of directors, Justice Mark Kennedy, sitting up here. We also have Bob Silverman with us tonight, who is partnered with the Wallace Foundation and is doing a great deal to revitalize downtown Montgomery. Bob, would you stand, please? And I believe Jet Williams is also with us tonight. Here's Jet. Tonight's first presenter has been a key figure in civil rights litigation in Alabama and the nation as a whole, really. We are especially happy he could be with us. He's a senior attorney for the law firm of Gray, Langford, South, McGowan, Gray, and Nathanson, Mr. Fred D. Gray.
To Mr. Joe Terry, who has really done an outstanding job in working, getting this program together. If he has called me once, he's probably called me a half dozen times. To Governor Wallace, I had the distinction of first meeting when he was a circuit judge, later representing him in the Alabama legislature while he was governor, during which period of time I filed a few lawsuits against him. To our guests of honor, our presenters, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to have been asked to participate in this historic first annual presentation of the Lurleen B. Wallace Award of Courage, honoring Mrs. Vivian Malone Jones. one of my distinguished clients. During the early part of 1963, I received a letter from Mr. J.L. LaFleur, a great, courageous civil rights leader in Mobile. In that letter that he wrote to me, he said, "Dear Mr. Gray, we are enclosing herewith retainer signed by Mrs. Bertha Malone," and then it states the address, 760 South Anthony Street, Mobile, Alabama, mother of Miss Vivian Malone. This suit, we hope, will mark the beginning of a new era of progress in race relations in Alabama, consistent with principles respecting the dignity of the individual, especially to acquire an equal education. That was the end of his letter. On April 15, 1963, on behalf of our honoree, I filed a suit in the United States District Court for the Northern District of Alabama, requesting that she be admitted to the University of Alabama. Subsequent thereto, Judge Grooms entered an order permanently enjoining and restraining the officials of the University of Alabama from denying to Vivian Malone and others similarly situated the right to enroll in the University of Alabama. Pursuant to that order, she was enrolled, and the rest is history. We're here tonight to talk about courage. Not only one, but two ladies who displayed tremendous courage at such young ages. It took courage for Mrs. Jones to file the suit. It took courage for her to face the odds at the University of Alabama. It took courage for her to endure what she endured. But she was able to graduate. And so we are here tonight. One of tonight's special presenters is one who can speak volumes on the topic of courage. First, the son of a man who, like Governor Lurleen Wallace, died much too young. And like Mrs. Vivian Malone Jones, possessed the inner fortitude it took to buck the status quo and to take brave steps. Mr. LaFleur was correct when he predicted what Vivian Malone's lawsuit would do. For indeed, it did mark the beginning of a new era of progress in race relations in Alabama. Our speaker, in his own right, has lived up to his famous name with his work. As a lawyer, he is a staunch defender of environment, protecting cases involving pollution of the Hudson River and the Long Island Sound and in Canada and in South America, litigating cases to force treatment plants to comply with the Clean Water Act. When I asked him earlier this evening what did he want me to say about him, he said, just tell him I'm an environmental lawyer trying to keep the environment clean. Our speaker has some roots in Alabama. He spent a year in this city writing a book which he has published concerning Judge Frank M. Johnson, Jr. in 1977. In 1980, he was state coordinator for Edward M. Kennedy's presidential campaign, a Democrat. And some 16 years later, he is still a Democrat. Please help me welcome Mr. Robert F. Kennedy, Jr., our next presenter.
Fred Gray is one of my heroes. I'm so happy to be back in Alabama. I always feel like I'm coming home here. I spent almost 2 years here. And every time I come back, I see so many old friends, and there are many of them here. So for me, it was a treat when I heard I was going to get the opportunity to come back, and I got to meet Vivian, who apparently I'd met back in 1963 when she came to my house. And usually people come up to me and say, don't you remember me? And I was introduced to 20 gazillion people from when I was little, and some of them I don't remember. But this time she was a little bit nervous because she didn't know whether she met me or not, because she knows she met 11 kids that day. But it was great to know that she's in the same business as I am, protecting the environment, and she's been doing one of the leaders in the environmental justice movement, which is what I've been doing for the last 13 years too. And I regret that she's now retired from EPA, but I hope that she'll keep on doing that work. For me, it's wonderful coming here and seeing also a lot of people that I don't know, but who have wonderful memories of my father, and so many of you shared those with me in the reception preceding this dinner. People who remembered him from the University of Alabama, or shook his hand, or saw him on the various campaigns. And for me, for all the members of my family, it's wonderful that the depth of feeling. When I come to Alabama, that always surprises me. It doesn't surprise me, but it surprised a lot of other people to find that here, but all over the country, to find that people still have such high regard and fond memories of my father and my uncle, President Kennedy, 25 or 30 years after their deaths. And that's something that's very, very touching for every member of my family. And I'm accustomed to being introduced, as Fred did, as Robert Kennedy's son. And all my life, I've been introduced as Bobby's son, or Jack's nephew, or Ted's nephew, or Joe's brother. Yesterday I was in Baltimore, and my sister is lieutenant governor there, and everybody said, "Oh, you're Kathleen's brother." But I do environmental lecturing at colleges now, and the younger students say, "Oh, you're Arnold's cousin." So that's a change in priorities. I came here tonight specifically because I know my father would want to be here if he were alive, because this is really the closing of a circle that spans 35 years, 2 generations in Alabama history and American history. To me, it has really broad significance. And I know in my father's life, he would feel that the force of this and the poignancy of this. I think the most poignant memory that I have of my father was my last memory of him, which was when we brought him, after he died, when we brought him down from New York to Washington. We waked him at St. Patrick's Cathedral, and then we brought him to Union Station, or to Penn Station in New York, and brought him down to Union Station in Washington, D.C. on the train. And there were huge crowds all the way down, lining the tracks. I was 14 years old at the time. And there was these just magnificent crowds on both sides of the railroad tracks, of white people, black people, rabbis, priests, nuns, every kind of person that makes up this country. And many of them had signs that said "Goodbye, Bobby." Many of them you could see that they were crying. And the thing that struck me, that even today strikes me most, is the number of people who were waving American flags. 4 years after that, when I was in college and trying to be an historian, I ran across demographic data that I marveled at, because it showed that many of the people, particularly the hundreds of thousands of white people who had lined that corridor from Baltimore to Washington in the 1972 primaries, who had been there for my father and voted for him, had voted in 1968, had voted in 1972, not for George McGovern, who was, in my view, more of the person, the candidate who was really carrying the torch for my father, but for George Wallace, and who was at that point still diametrically opposed to almost everything that my father believed in. And that, to me, at that time it occurred to me that every nation, like every human being, has two sides to it, and that sometimes the tempting thing to do is to appeal to, and sometimes the easier thing to do, is to appeal to people's fear or their bigotry or their pride or anger, and that it's much more difficult to appeal to the other side, to plug into that side of human beings, to get them to transcend their narrow self-interest and see themselves as part of the community, and say we're going to put our fear aside for a moment, and we're going to try to see ourselves as part of something bigger, and we're going to sacrifice and make the sacrifices and take the risks we need in order to do that. And I think my father had been able to do that, and he wasn't unique. There's been many other politicians throughout American history who had that ability, and my father was able to do it because he had a very simple vision, and the vision had appealed to people, and that vision was that this country was unique in the history of the world because we come from all over the place. We don't share any common culture or color or religion or history or language. We come from everywhere. And the only thing that really allows us to call ourselves a nation rather than just a continent where strangers have gathered to increase the size of their pile and move on, the only thing that allows us to call ourselves a nation or a community are shared values. And for Americans, the value that we share is a vision of what this country is supposed to mean, which is supposed to be a city on a hill, a light to all the other nations on earth about what humanity can accomplish if everybody works together and puts aside their differences and sees themselves as part of a community. And that vision was outlined for the first time by John Winthrop in 1630 when he was on the deck of the sloop Arbella, and he was coming over with the Puritans to the New World, and that was really the beginning of the American consciousness. And he said, God has given us this land, but he didn't give us the land so we can make ourselves rich or we can increase our carnal opportunities. He gave us this land because he wants us to do something for the rest of humankind. And when the Pilgrims landed, that wasn't the beginning of America or John Smith. It was when Winthrop made that speech. And that, although he was a British and he was a Puritan, that idea was adopted by every successive wave of immigrants that came to this country, that this nation was supposed to be something special. And I think that's what my father really believed in that. And he believed that we had been given the gift of this system of democracy, which the Greeks invented, which is why he loved the Greeks and why he always recited the Greek poets, because it was the only system ever invented that's able to harness all the energies of all the diverse people of our country. And we were given by God tremendous natural resources, unprecedented in the rest of the world, so that we could fulfill this destiny. And because we were given these things, history would judge us. And we would be judged not so much based upon the wealth of our citizens, or the size of our armies, or the throw weight of our weapons, or the power of our industry. But we were going to be judged based on how we cared for the least fortunate members of our society, how strongly we adhered to the principles upon which this nation was founded, including human rights and civil rights, how forcefully we reached out to include everybody in our community, and how strongly we resisted the seduction of the notion that we can advance ourselves as a nation by leaving our poor brothers and sisters behind. And that was the vision that I think my father fought for and ultimately died for. And that was the vision that brought all those people together who were different colors, who didn't really feel common ground with many of the people they were standing with, but were willing to stand together and take a risk for that vision. And to me, that's what this is about. It's about a reconciliation, it's about a redemption, and it's about the idea that we all need to embrace that vision and those values. And really, if you look at American history, all of American history, every major battle in American history has been a battle between those two notions. The notion, like the notion that the Spanish had when they settled Latin America, which is we're going to go in there and mine it, make ourselves rich, and get out and get as rich as we can. And the notion that John Winthrop had, which is we're going to come here and we're going to build a community, and it's not just for ourselves, but it's for the rest of the world. And that vision is more important than ever today, because there's this trend towards atomization and fragmentation that's going on all over the planet. But if people can look at America, if people from Yugoslavia or Northern Ireland can look at America and say, there's a place where Catholics and Protestants get along without killing each other. And they differ, but they don't kill each other. And the Croats and Serbs can look over here and say, there's a nation where there are Croats and there are Serbs and they don't kill each other. And that's really ultimately what this is about. And the South Africans the same, where there's blacks and whites. We are supposed to be able to teach people. We're supposed to be teaching people how to do this. And ultimately, I think George Wallace, Governor Wallace, that there's no better teacher than himself. And because he is somebody that does something, that's doing something with this foundation that is very rare among public servants, which is to say, the vision that I was pursuing was wrong. And here's the reasons it was wrong. And now we're going to try something different. And you don't see that kind of honesty and integrity in public service often. And for me, it's so exciting to be part of this tonight and to be able to meet Vivian, who was one of the people who gave this to us and who restored this vision for the rest of Americans. And to me, these people who were involved in this, the Fred Grays, the Vivian Malones, they are as big American heroes, or as fine American heroes as the soldiers that fought and died during the Revolutionary War, because they were part of a battle that gave this nation true constitutional democracy for the first time in its history. Prior to this battle, we didn't have that. The public resources, whether they were the schools or the vote or the privileges and duty of democracy, were not distributed evenly or democratically. And for the first time, we were given a democracy by these people. So they gave us democracy, and for that reason, they are heroes as great as any that we have. And thank you very much for letting me be a part of it.
Thank you, Bobby. This is my 19th day on the job as Executive Director of the Wallace Foundation. And tonight is really the first opportunity I've had to meet many of our board members, and I'm delighted to do so. But one of our board members was not really a stranger to me. I had already met him, of course, knew him from his life as a public servant. And I know he's not a stranger to most of you, Mr. George C. Wallace, Jr.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight, and I appreciate all of you being here with us on this, I believe, an historic occasion. I have the honor to introduce our next speaker to you, Angela Bay Buchanan. Bay Buchanan is currently the co-host of CNBC's Equal Time. In September of 1996, she joined Dee Dee Myers in co-hosting the engaging political talk show known for its candid conversations. In addition to her television career, Ms. Buchanan also hosts her own radio talk show on the United Broadcasting Network. Ms. Buchanan served as the campaign chair for her brother, Pat Buchanan's presidential campaigns in 1992 and 1996. During the 1996 presidential primary season, she emerged as a national figure, steadfastly championing the right to life of the unborn child. In the summer of 1996, Georgia Magazine recognized her as one of the top 20 political women in the nation, and she served as a political analyst for Good Morning America throughout the general election of 1992. Between the interim of the 1992 and 1996 presidential campaigns, Ms. Buchanan chaired the American Cause, the foundation founded by her brother Pat. The American Cause is an educational foundation dedicated to the principles of freedom, federalism, limited government, traditional values, and a foreign policy that puts America first. Ms. Buchanan began her political career as the national treasurer of Ronald Reagan's presidential campaigns in 1980 and 1984. This position catapulted her into a distinguished career beginning in 1981 when President Ronald Reagan appointed her to be Treasurer of the United States. At the age of 32, she was the youngest person to hold that position since it was established in 1775. Ronald Reagan called upon her again in 1983, this time to co-chair his Commission on Women Business Owners. In 1988, she co-chaired the California delegation to the Republican Convention and served as co-chair of the Defense Subcommittee on the Platform Committee. Later in 1990, she ran for treasurer of the state of California. A native of Washington, D.C., she has a master's degree in mathematics from McGill University in Montreal, Canada, and has further studies at several universities, including the University of South Wales in Australia. And in 1981, she received an honorary Doctor of Law degree from Samford University in Birmingham, Alabama. She is also the proud mother of 3 sons. Our next guest is a woman of courage in her own right, a woman unafraid to speak her mind and fight for issues and principles close to her own heart. Her dedication and commitment to the conservative cause, coupled with her engaging, sincere personality, have made her a leader of national significance. Bay, we're proud to have you with us, so would you please join me in extending a warm Alabama welcome to Bay Buchanan.
Thank you very much. This is some evening. I will say you have Vivian Malone and Governor George Wallace, Kennedy, Buchanan. I mean, can it get any better than this? It's only in America, I'm sure it is. I just wanted to tell my friend Robert that I know he's been working hard on that environment. If he could help us out with the environment in Hollywood, we could really appreciate it. We all have a vision for our country, and we share passion for it. It may not be the same vision, but it is in America where we can come together and be a family like tonight. We may have different ideas where we should go, but it is one nation, and we're friends and family, and we have enormous respect for one another, and that's what this evening, I believe, is all about. And why it is such a powerful evening, it really is the best of America tonight. When you think of what really has happened, a chapter in America is closed in a way that we can only hope so many other chapters close. And that is that you have 2 individuals, which 33 years ago really did have some strong beliefs and real passion for those beliefs. They understood and felt they were right, and they were going to stand up for those. In the case of Governor Wallace, he said to his people in Alabama, I'm going to be there to represent you. There's a tradition in the state, we're going to keep it. And he stood there and he took on the federal government. In the case of Vivian Malone, she said, now wait a minute, something's wrong about this. Something's real wrong. I have a right, and those of us in this country should share those rights. And we have a right to go to that university. And she said, I know that I'm right, and I'm going to step forward. I'm going to become part of this battle. And she stepped forward and she took on Governor Wallace, government of Alabama. And Vivian, I want to tell you something. If I had my choice between the federal government back 33 years ago and Governor Wallace, I'd have preferred taking on the federal government. That was a formidable foe you were dealing with. But it showed enormous courage. There's no question about it. She stepped forward as she did, had knowledge. She had a lot of knowledge, and a lot of people have knowledge of certain things that are wrong. And they talk about it, and they complain about it. They don't do anything about it. It's not everyone that steps forward. And when you do that, it's not just about you. It's not just about that cause. you send a message to so many others around the country who are also thinking that things might not be right. And they feel the courage. If she can do it, she stepped forward, and look what happened. Everything turned, and it came out right. Now, why can't I do it? It's my responsibility, too, to turn things around. That's what she did. She did it for a cause. She did it for herself, of course. She did it for her family. She did it for something bigger, though, really. She did it for a nation. And for that, we all have to be grateful. And then, a few years after that incident, another great thing happened. And that is that the Governor Wallace took a look and he said, you know, he's a proud man. He believed firmly in what he was doing. He felt it was right. And he took a look and he said, you know, I was wrong. She was right, and I'm glad she won. But I gotta do something else here. I gotta let the people know that she was right. And he stepped forward, something very, very seldom, as Robert pointed out, very seldom in the business of politics, to have a person who has that kind of power and clout and proud step forward and say, I was wrong, and in addition to that, I'm sorry if I caused any pain in my community because of my position. What a message for all America. That sometimes we recognize we're human, and we recognize that maybe we were going down the wrong track for whatever reason. And then we send a message to those people who are also going down the wrong track. That look, you can take a look at this again, as I have, and maybe you'll come to the same conclusion. You can turn people, you can convert them, you can come together. And people recognize we are part of one nation, and that we just have different visions, and sometimes we have to teach each other. We have to open our minds to different ideas. And that's what Governor Wallace did. Sent a great message. And then tonight it all came together. It really is the way it should happen. As we do battle out there for our own philosophies, and one side gets an edge here, another side moves up. But when the day's over, that we sit down together, and we laugh and we talk, as family members do, who often disagree, at least in my family. But they're all there together with one another at the end of the day. I've been asked to just speak about courage in women, as has been demonstrated by Vivian Malone. And I could talk about some of the women in our history. You know, Dolly Madison, which had enormous courage back in those days. As the British were about to take over that White House, she wouldn't move. They kept saying, no, no, you gotta come on. She said, I'm waiting for my husband. I got some things to do here. And she stayed until the last minute. She could see the battle going on. She wrote her sister, my husband's gonna need my support because things are not going too well. So I wanna be here when he gets here. And she remained. We could talk about Susan B. Anthony, who spent years of her life trying to tell women to step forward. We need that vote. I got a few friends who'd like to take that vote away, but I'm sure we all have those kind of people in our life. But she did. She worked hard out there. She accomplished an enormous amount. She committed her life to a cause. And because she stepped forward and really took on the opponents and said no, the traditions she took on, and she converted more and more until what was right happened. But I'd like to just spend a moment talking about all the courage that is out there today, women today. It's the quiet courage. And I learned it, and as I might say, Vivian, I imagine that you had similar experiences because I heard your mother's name raised. That's where I learned so much courage. And you know, I remember back at a time, because my mom had 9 children. Every morning she'd get up, she'd make breakfast for them all, for her husband. She'd make lunches for her husband and the children. And then there came a time when she only made 8 lunches for the children, 1 for her husband. And then she went off to the hospital to visit that daughter, the lunch she didn't have to make. And she said every day she went for 3 weeks to that hospital. She told the doctors, I'm going to be in those meetings every morning. I want to be there. I was a nurse. I want to understand what's happened. And the news was bad. Every day they said, there's a little hope. There's a little hope. But she got home there in time for those kids to come home from school. She was there. And the dinner was on the table. She felt it was necessary to have a stable home so the other kids weren't impacted. And she took it upon herself to be upbeat and positive so that the other ones weren't worried. And she took it upon herself to be the one that found out the news first, to report it to her husband. And he prayed and prayed for a miracle while she kept working with those doctors to see if you can find something here. What about this? And after 3 weeks, she got the message that no parent wants to ever hear, that there was no hope, and that you should take the daughter home and let her be around her family for the last couple months. And you know, she never let on. She made it a happy home, a positive home, so that young lady never realized what was happening. I was that young lady, that's why I know. My father won, he got his miracle. But she stayed there, and I had no knowledge. What burden did she carry with her every day as she got up, and did not relay any of those fears to that daughter, and all to the other children? What kind of courage is that it takes to face those problems every day and not pass them on? What message did she instill in those young kids when they realized exactly what she had done for them, to protect them? That happens across this country every day, not just in the pediatric wards, but every morning as those moms across this nation get up. And they make those lunches, make the breakfasts and the lunches, and they have fears and concerns that they carry with them about the job. Is it going to do it? Are they going to have enough money to pay those bills? The schools. Is my son going to be safe? The wayward child. What message can I give him? How can I bring him back? These are concerns they have. They're in the front lines of the battles we face across this country. They have knowledge. They understand the problems. But right now they have to take care of their own. They have to protect them. They have to do everything. They have to take the extra step. And they have to have the courage to do it every morning, no matter how discouraged they are at night. When they wake up, they have to find the courage again. And they do, every day across this country. And what message we have to send them is it comes a time, because of the knowledge they have, and because of the courage they have, they're going to have to step forward as they see changes have to be made. And they're going to have to be there and step forward when they can, as Vivian did. And it's an award like tonight that will help send them the message that they can do it. That the quiet courage is there. They've instilled it in their children. When their children are older, they'll have it. But you also have to send the message that at times certain people are going to be asked to step forward. Because if you don't, changes won't occur. It'll just be the grumbling. It'll be the concerns expressed to one another. But you won't have the change a nation needs. We need leaders who have real passion, not just the knowledge of what is wrong or ideas of where to go, but have the courage of those convictions to step forward and say, all right, it's my turn to be in the battle. I may not win, but I'm going to be in the battle and see if I can't move things a little forward with an open mind to different ideas, but with real conviction for what they believe is right. And this award, beginning tonight, is an excellent example of the message that Vivian Malone's story tells women across the country. 20 years old, she did it. They can do it too. And they will step forward. And each year as this award is given, and another lady of great courage is brought to the attention of thousands, and if not millions, of young women and middle-aged women, even those elderly women out there who are taking care of themselves with enormous courage, facing all kinds of odds. It'll be a message that it was worth it, that they are there, and that women like them across the country are there, and that it is a powerful nation as we do our best to move it in a way that makes it better tomorrow than it is even today. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Jay. Our next speaker comes from one of Alabama's two largest institutions of higher learning. You'll notice I didn't make any quality comparisons. I'm not going to jump into that briar patch. I will say, however, this man represents my favorite college of communication. At least that's what my degree says, if I remember correctly. Please welcome Dr. E. Culpeper Clark.
When you see a manuscript, one of two things can happen. Either the speech is going to be too long, which will make you positively angry, or the speech will be too careful, which will make you positively nervous. hope that neither occurs this evening. Governor Wallace, members and friends of the Wallace Foundation, distinguished guests, and all who are gathered to honor a woman of courage, Vivian Malone Jones, I bring you greetings from her alma mater, the University of Alabama. I might say in this gathering to these inspirational speakers, Robert and Bay, welcome to the battleground of freedom. One of the problems we've had in this state on this battleground of freedom, where so much of this nation's history has been made, is the problem of knowing, remembering who won. Tonight I'm here to say to Fred Gray and Vivian Malone Jones and James Hood, you won. But we all won as the members of the Wallace family and the governor opened their history to inspection, saying honestly and forthrightly what their part in our history has been. Before I get into my remarks, it is only fair that I tell you a little bit about where I come from. A profound fact of my childhood, not noted in any resume, is the best indicator I can give you this evening of who I am. I grew up in a wonderful town in southwest Georgia. If you go down to Jim and Marianne Lofton's hometown of Dothan and turn left and head east on Highway 84, you'll get to Ed Bridges' hometown on the Flint River. And if you go about 20 miles further, you will get to the wonderful town called, not Hope, called Cairo. The uninitiated use its Egyptian pronunciation. At some point in my idyllic childhood, I learned that Jack Roosevelt Jackie Robinson had been born on my Uncle Lloyd's and Aunt Edna's farm. In fact, he was born the same year, 1919, as Governor Wallace. Still later, I learned that the young man streaking to a silver medal only a fraction of a second behind Jesse Owens' Olympic triumph in the 200 meters was Robinson's brother, Mac, also born in Cairo, Georgia. At the end of my barefoot years, only a short time before I finished high school, I came to the realization, and this is the profound fact of my growing up, that had Jackie Robinson grown up in Cairo, there would have been no Jackie Robinson, nor would his brother have been in Berlin to give Adolf Hitler a double dose of African-American prowess. Fortunately for the Robinsons, Jackie's mother had the indomitable courage to move clear across this country and raise her family in Pasadena, California. The fact is that my resume, what brings me here this evening, was built upon a foundation of pure preferential treatment. When I graduated from high school and set out for college, I had not had to compete against a third of the kids my age. They were black. Nor, for that matter, had I competed with any of the girls. Seats in professional schools, they were told, were wasted on women. So I stand here tonight, the product of preferential treatment, to salute the accomplishments of an African-American woman who graduated from college the same year I did, but a person whose enrollment and graduation from the University of Alabama symbolized an end to 350 years of legal preferment for people like me. I often think back to that unusually hot day, June 11, 1963. By the way, my job here this evening is as a historian. I'm going to particularize the courage that we honor this evening. I think back to that day, June 11, 1963, when Nicholas Katzenbach, representing Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, confronted Governor Wallace to secure the admission of Vivian Malone and James Hood. It was political theater at its most dramatic, a chance for the Kennedy administration to seal its covenant with the civil rights movement and for the governor to make good on his promise to maintain the law and order of segregation. Although theater, it was a necessary drama. In 1955, the University of Alabama had been the first public institution ordered to integrate under the Brown versus Board of Education implementation decree. Now in June 1963, Alabama was the last state still holding out against desegregation. A final act was needed. I have compared the scene in Tuscaloosa to a symbolic reenactment of Appomattox. Once again, federal authority confronting state authority to end a system of legal white supremacy. In writing about that encounter at Foster Auditorium, a few scenes stand out for me, and I would like to share them. The first occurred 6 weeks earlier, April 25, when your dad, Robert, sat in the governor's office to talk with Wallace about his pledge to stand in the schoolhouse door. As I leafed through the transcript, I did not expect to find much in a conversation like that. After all, it had been tape recorded, and neither man was about to budge. Moreover, like many academics, I had become something of a cynic. But in their hour-long conversation, often exasperating, I began to sense something more. Not only Robert Kennedy's deep conviction about civil rights, but I also heard the future Governor Wallace. Not the defender of segregation, though that was his purpose that day, but the later governor, the one who could say he was wrong. Strange as it sounds, in that strange and strained conversation of so many years ago, I could see possibilities that would lead to an evening like this. There were other scenes of that time, and we should not forget them. Only days before the governor and the attorney general sat down to their discussion, on a lonely stretch of road near Gadsden, Alabama, a white postal worker from Baltimore, Maryland, he was actually a native of Mississippi and a battle-fatigued Korean veteran, started a quixotic freedom walk from Chattanooga, Tennessee to Jackson, Mississippi, where he proposed to give Governor Ross Barnett a message about ending segregation. He was found a few days later, face down on the side of the road. In his pocket, they found a hand-scribbled note to Governor Barnett. It said very simply, "Be gracious and do more than is asked of you." Little could that postal worker have known that his simple words, "Be gracious and do more than is asked of you," were about to be lived by the woman we honor this evening. What Vivian Malone did and the grace she showed in doing it matched Hemingway's definition of courage, the one John F. Kennedy so much admired: grace under pressure. As I wrote about the schoolhouse door, her calm demeanor captured and sobered my imagination. What was it like, I wondered, to sit in that car under a broiling sun as Katzenbach made his first approach to the governor? What was it like to be escorted to a dorm where she would live in virtual isolation for the next 2 years while the final details of her enrollment were worked out? What was it like to walk through the portals of Foster Auditorium to end, finally and forever, the last vestige of legal segregation in public education? All of us here this evening can imagine her courage, but only one of us here this evening actually lived it. That same night, as she confronted the lonely prospects of the next 2 years in Tuscaloosa, the President of the United States went on television to declare civil rights no longer a legal but a moral issue, and to set in motion the 1964 Civil Rights Act. That same night, Medgar Evers was shot dead in Jackson, Mississippi. The political theater of the afternoon had always been more than sound and fury. On that June day in 1963, Governor Wallace represented an unacceptable past and Vivian Malone an uncertain future. This evening, their presence together represents almost unimaginable possibilities for reconciling our irreconcilable pasts, for uniting what stern custom parted wide. The historically unthinkable is made possible because the one who was wrong had the courage to proclaim his error, and the one who was right is here. History is, after all is said, the settling of accounts. I cannot help but think that Lurleen Burns Wallace is smiling upon this occasion.
Thank you, Dr. Clark. Being as I've only been here 2 or 3 weeks, I'm still learning about some of the goals and objectives of the Wallace Foundation. But I think I can say with some confidence that the mission of this public service foundation is not about promoting a political discipline or supporting a particular candidate or choosing sides in a campaign debate. The foundation exists very simply to implement a better quality of life for our state and nation. And as I learned from Dr. Clark's associates quite a few years ago, the best way to do this is just let the picture tell the story. So if you guys will kill your lights, we'll roll this.
History, a snapshot of events once current, now remembered. The interplay of human emotions, power struggles, changes. Governor George C. Wallace and Governor Lurleen B. Wallace played a leading role in Alabama's political history. And now, the foundation established to honor them looks to the future. The George and Lurleen Wallace Center for the Study of Southern Politics seeks to be many things. The center will house a state-of-the-art conference center where the next generation of policymakers can share ideas and engage in healthy debate. It will be a hub for research.
The center will also serve as a repository of our unique history, with in-house archival material and interactive links to archives in other southern states. So students like my sons Robbie and Corey will have millions of pages of information at their fingertips.
Historical artifacts from the Wallace era will be on display in the museum, alongside 4 rotating exhibits. The Center for the Study of Southern Politics will also be a place where public policy will be developed.
We expect a great deal of interest in our public policy efforts, especially in the areas of child abuse prevention, research involving the needs of the citizens of Alabama, and the exploration of new ways to generate income for poor counties within the state.
Before this important work can be done, however, the foundation must generate its own income. Building the facility, preserving documents, and gathering significant collections of political papers from across the South will cost millions. But we know it's a dream worth pursuing. It's a dream that will forever capture our times.
I know my mother would feel deeply touched to have her name attached to such a worthwhile endeavor, because it brings together all the things she loved. It will be a place where families can bring their children, where students can learn firsthand about their roots, and where scholars will come to study Southern politics.
Times are changing. But as Sir Winston Churchill said at the end of another turbulent period, this is not the end. Another phase looms before us in which alliance will once more be tested, and in which its formidable virtues may be to preserve peace and freedom. The future is unknowable, but the past should give us hope.
At this point, I would like to ask a few people to join me at the podium. They just happen to be the children of Governor George Corley Wallace and Lurleen Burns Wallace. Would you please join us? Miss Bobby Wallace Parsons, please. Miss Peggy Wallace Kennedy. Mr. George Corley Wallace, Jr. And the baby of the family, Lee Wallace Guy. I know Governor Lurleen Wallace was proud of this group, and I'm equally positive their father is too. And that father is also with us tonight, Governor George Corley Wallace.
On behalf of the Wallace family, please allow me, if you would, a personal reflection about our mother and the quiet courage we observed in her more private moments. During her battle with the pain and suffering associated with cancer, she, until her last breath, constantly thought of her family and friends. Her constant devotion to our well-being was evident as we visited with her during those difficult days, at which time she would ask about our lives and how we were doing, never speaking about her own condition and the pain she had to endure. The source of her courage was her faith, a faith which led her to ask that our Lord's will be done and not her own, especially during her last days. The grace and dignity with which she faced her own death has been a source of inspiration to countless thousands of Alabamians. The depth of affection the people of Alabama still have for her, as expressed to me virtually every day of my life, is a constant reminder that my mother still uplifts us today by the life she led, people she touched, and the goodness she embraced. I see so much of my mother's spirit in my sisters. Bobby's love for the outdoors, Peggy's devotion to her children, and Lee's sense of humor and wit. How she would have enjoyed hunting adventures with Bobby and Jim. How she and Peggy would have talked to children and the future of those children. The laughter she and Lee would have enjoyed together makes me smile tonight. Our mother's spirit is present with us tonight as we come together in understanding and in reconciliation. Her spirit is with us as we embrace the best within ourselves. Her spirit is with us as we learn from the past and move into the future. Her spirit is with us as we simply and purely love one another. 33 years ago, my mother was 37 years of age. And as you saw in the video, my sisters and I were quite young. In 1963, courage to us meant diving off the high dive at camp. Vivian Malone Jones was just Vivian Malone in 1963, and she was young as well. But her test of courage was far more demanding than anything anyone in her generation had ever faced. Think about it. A teenager standing up to flanks of National Guardsmen, cameras, lights, and national commentators. But Vivian Malone had the courage to put one foot in front of the other and to walk right through that firestorm into the history books. Following her graduation from the University of Alabama in 1965, Vivian Malone Jones continued to do the right thing. She has had a distinguished career in the Environmental Protection Agency. Her work with voter education is legendary, and she has made her mark in the business community as well. Today, Vivian Malone Jones still walks with her head held high and with courage in every step. It is our privilege to give the first ever Lurleen Wallace Award of Courage to a woman whose actions continue to make our lives better, not only in Alabama, but in the entire nation. I introduce to you Vivian Malone Jones.
This is indeed a great evening. Thank you so very much, Governor Wallace, the Wallace family, foundation, and all of you who are here tonight as we celebrate a changing era. It is a time of change because there are a lot of things going on in our country today. And we need to know that we can make a difference right here in the state of Alabama. I would like to take this opportunity right now to thank my husband, Dr. Mac Jones. And the reason I'm doing this is because he was there with me back in 1963 when he would come over to the campus when it was very difficult. I mean, it was difficult for me to be there, but it was even more difficult for him to come through all of those guards and all of the policemen and all of the things that were going on at that time to come over to take me out during that period of time, and especially during a time when I was ostracized by the majority of students on campus. There weren't that many people who would talk to me. I remember the first day I went to class, and I remembered that the professor made a statement. He said, anyone who doesn't want to be in here at this point in time could leave. About half of the class left. So these were some very trying times. But one of the things that I know that sustained me during those very trying times, those difficult times, was my faith and belief in God. I would like to thank all of my other friends who are here tonight from Atlanta and Birmingham and from all over to just share in this occasion. And you know, it's always a pleasure for me to return to Alabama. Alabama is still, of course, as we say, Alabama the beautiful. It has a lot of promise here. When I think about Alabama, I think about the hills to the north. I think about the Gulf of Mexico to the south. It's a beautiful state. It has for a long time had promise, but that promise has not always been there for all of us. And this night celebrates a time when we all can, in fact, come together. And this is why it is so significant in our history here in Alabama. Alabama has come a long way from slavery to segregation, desegregation, resegregation, just as most of the nation has. But the question tonight is, what lessons have we learned as we move into the new millennium? Alabamians, make good on your promise to all of the citizens of this great state, whether they're black, white, Hispanic, whether they're women, Asians, Native Americans, make good on that promise to everybody. We can't afford, at this time of the competition, international competition, we can't afford to let anyone not realize his or her full potential. Alabama, make good on your promise tonight. Good evening. I'm so very honored to be here and to receive the Lurleen B. Wallace Award. I didn't know an awful lot about Governor Lurleen Wallace. My memories of a governor of Alabama was in that of the stand in the schoolhouse door. And it has stayed with me for many, many years. And I'm often asked, what do you think about the stand that George Wallace took? I've always maintained that I felt it was not right, but the part that is so good, and has been mentioned by several of our speakers tonight, is that Governor Wallace also recognized that this was not the right thing to do, and extends tonight a hand of friendship to say that I was wrong, but let's do better next time. Let's learn from our past mistakes. And I thank you for that. All of the Wallace family, George, and George and I had an opportunity once to almost work together on an environmental justice project. And it's kind of interesting the way this happened. He was looking for the person in the Southeast region who handled environmental justice work. He called Washington and talked with the lady in Washington, and she says, it's Vivian Malone Jones. And he said, the Vivian Malone Jones. Unfortunately, I was on travel, and by the time that we were able to connect, he had already completed his project. But we almost got together, but I had never had the opportunity to meet any members of the family, the Wallace family, and it is a pleasure. My family appreciates you. We certainly enjoyed our reception in Atlanta, and my brother Elvin, and I always talk about Elvin, and we talked about who you're known as. He has a son who plays professional basketball, and so we asked, well, Elvin, that's Jeff Malone's father. But 35 years ago, when I applied for admission to the University of Alabama, and this was even before George Wallace was governor, and I was told by the university that there was no room for a young African-American woman, not because I was not qualified, but because of the color of my skin. 2 years later, in 1963, I entered the University of Alabama amid protests by the state, but protection from the federal government. Tonight we do celebrate a coming of age, a season of forgiveness. And I remember, as I heard Robert Kennedy Jr. speak, I remember so very well my visit with his father on that day in 1963, as we shared our versions of that fateful day in June. I remember working at the Department of Justice, where he served as Attorney General, and the stand that he took to save America. I remember John F. Kennedy saying, we owe it to them and we owe it to ourselves to make this a better country. And I would just like to again thank Robert Kennedy Jr. for being here, and to thank him for his family and all that they have meant to us in the past as well as in the present. Several months ago, when I received a call from Peggy Wallace Kennedy about an award being given in her mother's name, Lurleen B. Wallace, and that the Wallace family wanted me, Vivian Malone Jones, to receive the award. You can just imagine how stunned I was at that call. But you know, the more I talked with the family members, the more I learned how earnestly they wanted to make amends. I mean, it was the most sincere, some of the most sincerest conversations that I've ever had. It made me understand better about Lurleen Wallace, even though I did not know the governor. And I am so very honored to be able to receive this award this evening. Most people never realize that I had never had the opportunity to meet Governor Wallace until tonight. This was my very first physical meeting with the governor. The first time we've had the opportunity to come face to face. I am pleased to say that our meeting was one of understanding, mending, and charity. For it is written that of all the virtues that any person might have or might acquire, the greatest of these is love. Most of us in this room have a love for God, but we have to realize we can't love God and hate our neighbors. We have to learn to love each other and care for each other. 3 decades ago, President Kennedy talked about discrimination and the immorality of a nation of people that denied equal rights and opportunities to African Americans and other people of color. And I'm going to quote him, "The heart of the question is whether all Americans are to be afforded equal rights and equal opportunities, whether we treat our fellow Americans as we want to be treated." He went on to ask a very pertinent question that is equally relevant today. If an American, because of the color of his skin, cannot enjoy the full and free life which all of us want, then who among us would be content to have the color of his skin changed and stand in his place? End of quote. Yes, we are all our brother's keeper. America will not be free until we are all free. Free from the poverty, discrimination, illiteracy, drugs, and despair that's plagued so many of our communities throughout this nation. We cannot be economically, morally, or educationally sound if we don't seek to raise up all Americans with us. As long as America spends more money building jails and schools, keeping inmates, than educating our young people, bringing in and sustaining drugs in our communities, denigrating people in need without caring for them as people, then we can't be the great nation that we should be and could be. We must work together to provide alternatives for our young people. We must work at the national level, at the state level, at local levels, so that laws can be enacted for the people. These are laws that will help all of the people, not just selected. Let us not yet write off affirmative action. We are still struggling with economic and social injustice in this country. When we looked at it, as Carly mentioned earlier, when President Kennedy on that night in 1963 talked about changing America, presenting and proposing the Civil Rights Act, which was later signed by President Lyndon Johnson, and Voting Rights Act, that has not been that long ago. There is still not equal access to education, housing, employment, or medical care in this country today. We must live up to the letter and intent of the law of this land. When we think of the housing situation in this country, of redlining, and of many other problems that are plaguing our community, we know that there are still legal battles to be fought, as Fred Gray fought in the 1960s. We must deal with the issues fully understanding that all of God's children are equal and that God is not a respecter of persons or positions. We cannot afford to write off a race of people because they are different. There is certainly no basis for this in this country. Our mission today is to make this place, Alabama, a better state for all of its citizens, regardless of race or sex. We have the wisdom and experience, we've talked about that tonight, that would let us know that we can make that change. With the experience and wisdom that we have, let us incorporate the good and let us discard the bad. I would like to thank the Wallace Foundation for stepping forth with a new vision, a new mission for the state of Alabama. I would like to thank them, and we've talked about a scholarship going to an African-American student in this state, and we know that this is sorely needed. I know how difficult it is these days for young people to go to college, and I really want to thank them for establishing and applaud them for establishing such a scholarship. I'm counting on you, Alabama. This is my home state. I was born here. I went to school here all of my life. And I know that Alabama will chart the future to keep Alabama beautiful and to keep it the kind of state that we all of us can depend on to make a difference. I would again like to say thank you for inviting me here. I'm looking forward to working with the Wallace Foundation in the future, especially as you chart new policies and new direction for the state of Alabama. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivian. I realize this is running a little longer than we thought, but as far as I'm concerned, it was well worth it. Before we close and concluding tonight's celebration, I'd like to ask Justice Mark Kennedy to come up with a few closing comments and a toast, which they will be pouring for us as he speaks, so bear with us. Justice Kennedy.
As this extraordinary night comes to a close, I cannot help but pause with my family and be reminded of what this city and this historical capital has witnessed over the past 150 years. It was in this very building in the 1860s that a new nation was formed. It was in this very city that the battle for equality and justice was fought and won. And tonight, it is in this very room that we see outstretched hands of friendship rather than upraised hands of contempt as we turn our faces to the future, never forgetting the past, but being able to say proudly, we have overcome. For you see, we have overcome the lines of color that have separated us. We have overcome the indifference that made us hate. We have overcome the politics that made us expedient. But most importantly, perhaps, we have overcome the fear that lied within our hearts that kept us from proclaiming that we all stand as brothers and sisters in the eyes of God. If there could be only one phrase to describe the hope and the vision of the Wallace Foundation and its founders and its public policy center, it would be making a difference. Making a difference in the lives of children through building communities of support and concern that will promise that no child in this state will ever be left behind. Making a difference in the lives of families by working for better opportunities, for better and improved health care, for better educational opportunities, and for jobs that pay a fair wage, and for the hope in the heart of a mother and father that their children can live their lives free from the clutches of crime, violence, drugs, and the despair and heartbreak of prejudice. Tonight, you and I can begin a journey together that probably would have been unthinkable 33 years ago. And to each of you, you can join Vivian Malone and George Wallace and come with them. No matter what the color of your skin, you can come with them. No matter what your gender may be, you can come with them. Whether you be Jew or Gentile, you can come with them. And whether you are Democrat or Republican, you can come with them. But the price of the passage that you must pay is that you believe that the politics of yesterday are now gone, that you know that the pettiness of political bickering and the greed of false prophets must be shouted down, that you feel that the destiny of our country must be all of our responsibility, and that you speak so that all can hear that we stand united for the well-being of all Americans. Earlier this week, I read a speech that was given by Lurleen Burns Wallace at a commencement ceremony shortly after she had won the Democratic primary for governor on May the 27th, 1967. She speaks to us tonight through her words when she said, Every important event and act, every great movement in history, for good or evil, has been propelled by the initiative of an individual or the actions of a small segment of our population. We've had our Washingtons and our Lincolns, but more importantly, we have had our millions of men of lesser stature who have also faced great challenges and faced them alone. These men at times approached the ragged edge of despair, but they sought the Scripture. Whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are of good report, think on these things. Participate. Give yourselves back to your country. Take part. Insist that others do likewise. So we at the Wallace Foundation and at the Public Policy Center ask you, our friends, to book your passage with us tonight and come with us in this state to fight for, speak for, and live for the day when a broken-hearted child, a working man and his wife, a businessman and his company, a preacher or a teacher, and the legions of men, women, and children like them can turn to the light of our lives in this room and look into our eyes and say, thank you for caring and for making our lives better. Tonight we have honored the courage of two outstanding and remarkable women that have touched us all, Lurleen Burns Wallace and Vivian Malone Jones. And in doing so tonight, you and I and all of us have made history. The two long roads that have led us to this place from the University of Alabama in 1963 have converged tonight, and like two flowing streams have now become one. It is along this new way that Vivian Malone Jones and George Coley Wallace will travel, and it will be now through their example of recognition and reconciliation that we can build our map to the future. So as we prepare to leave this place this evening, let us raise our glasses and offer a toast to the future, to Vivian Malone Jones' kind and generous family, and to Vivian herself for her past acts of courage and for her strength of conviction in believing that by traveling the road together, arm in arm, there is nothing that should be impossible. Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking part in this first annual celebration. That concludes tonight's gala, and please be careful going home. Good night.
In a moment, an Arkansas Senate debate